The KwaZulu-Natal Rural Women's Movement is celebrating a landmark judgment against the Ingonyama Trust. A ruling by the Pietermaritzburg High Court has declared the trust acted unlawfully and violated the Constitution by concluding residential leases with people who are, in fact, the true owners of the land in terms of Zulu customary law. The movement accused the trust of tricking them into leasing the land they already had permission to occupy. They now say the judgment will restore their dignity and land rights. Let's get some reaction now. For more on this ruling, I'm joined by Lawson Naidoo from the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution, KSEC. Lawson, good afternoon, and thank you very much for your time. I guess we are saying it's a landmark ruling. This is a big one.
It really is a breakthrough judgment for people occupying land in rural areas across South Africa. I know this application was specific to the Ingonyama Trust, and that land is under the custody of the trust. But it's a far-reaching judgment that affirms the customary law rights that people enjoy over land in South Africa, and says to the state that they have a responsibility in terms of the Constitution to ensure that those customary rights are formalized and adequately protected, so that they cannot be diluted in any way, as was done in this particular case by the Ingonyama Trust, seeking to convert customary rights to land to 40-year leases. So this is a very important judgment that will affect many millions of people across the country.
Especially rural women, as I've just said. I mean, we know how much of them in KwaZulu-Natal were affected by this. I remember an interview a few months ago when a lady said, I mean, if I don't have a husband and even my elder son, they will give him the land, and then they're wanting us to pay for the land, and I didn't know that I must pay for my land. So, I mean, that's taking out all heartache and sorts of headaches for those rural women.
Indeed, and in fact, one of the applicants in this case, together with CASAC and the Rural Women's Movement in KwaZulu-Natal, there were 7 individual applicants, one of whom was a woman in exactly that position that you described, Dan, where she was unable to sign the lease agreement even if she wanted to, because they said that she must bring along a male relative to sign it on her behalf, because as a single woman she was not able to do so. So this is how the Ingonyama Trust has acted and operated to the detriment of women living in rural areas.
Yeah, before I forget, and very briefly, Lawson, to this question, what was KSEC's interest in this case? Why did you decide to pick up the cudgels and have this fight?
Well, this was an issue that had been brewing for some time, Dan, and this is a fundamental constitutional issue about access to land and securing proper tenure over land for people who have been marginalized, people who are largely poor, living in rural areas. And they, had approached the Legal Resources Centre and didn't have the capacity on their own to be able to launch an application of this nature, and welcome the involvement of CASAC in this matter, that took up the constitutional and legal battle on their behalf to restore the dignity of over 5.2 million people who reside on trust land under the control of the trust.
So now what happens next? The landmark ruling is done and dusted. Are you aware if the Ingonyama Trust is planning to appeal? Can it appeal this ruling?
Well, of course they can appeal the ruling. There's provision there, but I think a proper reading of the judgment will demonstrate that the court has found extremely strong grounds for the arguments that we put forward, that the arguments that were put forward by the trust were really dismissed by the court. So the likelihood of another court coming to a different conclusion would seem to be remote. So I would be surprised, A, if they opted to appeal, and B, even if they did so, whether they would be granted leave to do so. I think that the time has now come for the Ingonyama Trust to acknowledge the wrongs that it has done, and to take this opportunity to ensure that those people who have unlawfully paid monies over to the trust over many years are reimbursed, and that their title to land is properly restored.
Do you know how much money we're talking about that could be reimbursed?
Well, we know from some of the accounts that the Ingonyama Trust has presented to Parliament in recent years that they've been collecting in excess of 100 million rand a year in income. Now, that comes from various sources, including the leasing of commercial land. So, what we do know is that this will constitute several millions of rands over several years. But the onus will be on the Ingonyama Trust to now produce all of those lease agreements that have been signed to be able to ascertain and determine the quantum of money that is due to be reimbursed to residents there. So there's a lot of work to be done in that regard, but those records will be with the Ingonyama Trust.
Yeah, they should have them because they've presented the numbers to Parliament, as you said. And if you're running a trust, you have to keep a good set of books if you're running a trust. Now, it will take a little bit longer, of course, for that to happen. I'm just thinking here, the Ingonyama Trust has got one trustee, and that's the AmaZulu King. Am I wrong in saying that, Lawson?
You're absolutely correct.
So here's an opportunity. I mean, I think for the incoming, the new AmaZulu King, King Misuzulu Gazwelithini, as a young king, to show from what he said in the interview that he gave, the exclusive interview on eNCA, his approach to working for the people and the love for the people, to show exactly that he can walk the talk. He has a wonderful opportunity. Instead of challenging this ruling, he should embrace it. That's what I would think.
Well, indeed, and one would think that the new king will also look at the composition of the board of the trust, because the chair of the board of the trust, Mr. Ngwenya, came under scathing criticism from this judgment for the manner in which he conducted himself in the course of the judgment. And one would certainly hope that the new king seeks new advisors that will advise him properly, that will restore harmony and dignity to people in KwaZulu-Natal.